Hello there everyone and welcome back to my channel.
Mr. Backwards.
If you didn't already know, today marks day 4 of my Halloweek series where I release a new video each of the weekdays coming up to Halloween. I've already got 3 videos up on my channel, and then there's going to be 2 more coming out Wednesday and Thursday of Halloween, so make sure you subscribe so you don't miss those last 2, and also follow me on Instagram and Twitter. Both of them are under my name Ben Burnell. If you don't know me, my name is Ben Burnell. I'm a professional actor living in Vancouver, and I like creepy, gross, and mysterious things. Today I'm going to be talking about Kaz II, also known as the Ghost Yacht. Kaz II was the name of a 9.8 meter catamaran that was found on April 20th of 2007, drifting 163 kilometers or 88 nautical miles off the eastern coast of Australia, with all 3 of its crew members missing. The ship was manned by 3 men who were all residents of Perth in Western Australia. The owner and skipper of the boat was named Derek Batten. He was 56 years old. Brothers Peter and James Tunstead, aged 69 and 63, were his 2 best mates and were also very experienced sailors. Derek himself was also a well-experienced and careful yachtsman. Derek and the Tunstead brothers purchased the yacht 10 months before they departed for the trip. They were planning this trip for a long time. Their intended course was to depart from Airlie Beach and then sail along the northern and western coasts of Australia. This trip would have taken them 8 weeks, and it was a 5,000 kilometer sail along some of the most beautiful coasts in the world. At the end of the trip, they would dock back in Perth. It would have been the longest trip that any of the 3 sailors had ever attempted before, but they took a lot of courses coming up to their departure, so they were well prepared for this trip.
The voyage was ambitious, to say the least.
They set off Sunday, April 15th of 2007 from Airlie Beach at around 7 or 8 a.m. The people who saw them off that morning said that they were all in good spirits. After their departure at around 10 a.m., James Tunstead started to take some videos on board the ship of their journey. It shows that they were already having a good time and definitely enjoying their trip. Peter was seen fishing off the back of the boat in a few shots, and Derek Batten was at the helm. Around the same time that James was taking these videos, Peter phoned his wife to let her know that everything was going good, they were enjoying their trip, and that their next stop was in Townsville, around 2 days away. Also at the same time, Derek made a routine call to the radio operator on shore. And to this day, the call that Peter made to his wife and the call that Derek made to the radio operator is the last that anyone has heard from the 3 men to this day. The boat never made it to its docking place in Townsville. 3 days after the men had originally departed from Airlie Beach on April 18th of 2007, their ship was spotted by a Coast Guard helicopter miles off course near the Great Barrier Reef and with its sail shredded. They noted that the crew might be in distress because of the state the boat was found in, so they sent out an alert to rescuers for them to locate the boat. It took another 2 days before rescuers were able to board Kaz II on April 20th, and what they found was very confusing. The 3 crew members, Peter, Derek, and James, had completely vanished without any signs of an accident or any kind of a struggle on board.
Rescuers find no sign of the crew. But even more alarming, they find evidence that whatever took place on board must have taken them by surprise.
The yacht's engine was still running, and their clothes were neatly folded at the end of the boat, and a laptop was still running on the table. The only immediate signs that anything was wrong was that the crew was missing and that its sails were shredded.
Keys were still in the ignition of the boat. The maps were still laid out on the table. Sugar and tea bags were still in the kitchen. Fishing lines were still on board.
Rescuers towed the Kaz II back to port, where they found a few more signs of something not right. The first thing they found was that there was a fishing line and lure tangled around the portside rudder. That was where in the videos James had taken, his brother Peter was seen fishing. Because of the timestamp on the video James took, as well as their last radio contact Derek made to the radio control officer being roughly the same time, it's believed by investigators that the 3 men disappeared around 30 minutes after the video and radio call. So that was around 10:30 a.m. But the fishing line and the videos were the only signs that the men had even launched the Kaz II at all. According to investigators, the state of the Kaz II looked like someone had just drove it into port and parked. Forensic investigators combed the Kaz II for any forensic evidence that could lead to clues of the crew's whereabouts. Meanwhile, a massive search was launched by air and sea to see if any of the men could be spotted floating out at sea or stranded on one of the nearby islands. But like I said, forensic investigators found no signs of a struggle or an accident. The cabin was in pristine condition except for some magazines, a newspaper, and a wine cask laying on the floor. Investigators quickly determined, though, that the magazine, newspaper, and wine cask had actually fallen to the floor after the men disappeared while the boat just drifted aimlessly at sea. So even that wasn't a sign of a struggle. There were also a few butter knives found in the sink, so investigators were able to determine that at some point the men had had something to eat. On a bench, there was a sheath of plastic fishing knives, but investigators determined that none of them had been used recently. Investigators also found a firearm and some ammunition under Derek's bed, but they hadn't been used or even moved. The only other clue investigators could find on the ship was the ship's GPS. The GPS record shows at 10:30 on the day they set sail, something happened that made the boat veer dramatically off course, farther out into sea, away from their destination. This time matches up with the video timestamps as well as their last radio contact. So investigators believe that whatever happened to the men happened at 10:30 a.m. on April 15th, just 2 hours after they set sail for this 8-week-long voyage. As well as looking into the GPS records, investigators were also examining the videos that James took. These were the facts that investigators were able to get from the videos. The videos were taken at 10:05 a.m. Derek Batten was at the helm steering the ship. Peter Tunstead is fishing off the port side back of the boat, and he is not wearing a life jacket. The sea is choppy, and Derek and James are also not wearing life jackets. A long white rope can be seen in the videos trailing after the boat in the water. When the videos were taken, the engine was not running. The boat's fenders are seen hanging off both sides of the boat's safety rails. The fenders are the things that hang off the side of a boat to keep it from bumping into the dock when they're setting sail or coming into port. At one point in the video, James turns the camera around 360 degrees to show their surroundings and nearby islands. This also helped investigators pinpoint their exact location at the time. Also in the videos, James's shirt and glasses are seen in a different place than where investigators found them. This means that for some reason they had been moved between the video being taken and when the men disappeared. So the forensic investigation had pretty much turned up nothing, and unfortunately that was also the case for the search and rescue operations. On the day the boat had originally been spotted drifting out at sea on April 18th, the search and rescue efforts began. The Australian Search and Rescue had sent out a Navy aircraft to search the area around where the boat had been found to try and locate Derek, Peter, and James. The Bowen Voluntary Marine Rescue also launched a coastal and island search at the same time. While those searches were going on during the day, that same night an aircraft with infrared capabilities was sent out to search the reef and the cays. None of these searches turned up any sign of the crew. The next day, a full-scale search was launched. This involved volunteer rescue units from several towns, as well as the Townville Coast Guard, which had been the Kaz II's destination. This massive search included 2 rescue helicopters, 9 airplanes, and 2 commercial vessels. The data that was found on the Kaz II's GPS was used to try and narrow down their search parameter, but no sign of the crew was found. A survival time expert, Dr. Paul Luckin, was consulted to see just how likely it was that they were going to find the men alive. He said it was almost impossible they were going to be found alive. This was because when the very first search efforts were launched, the men had already been missing for 3 days. All their life jackets and the orange life preserver were found on board the Kaz II, so if the men fell overboard, they wouldn't have had any of these tools. The search team still had hope though, and they continued their efforts for an entire week. But the search crews were finally called back in on April 25th, 7 days after they had been sent out on April 18th. To this day, the disappearance of the Kaz II crew remains one of Australia's strangest disappearances. And also to this day, it's still undecided what happened to the crew. Did they all fall overboard in a tragic accident, or was it something a little less regular? So, what are the theories? The first one was ruled out quickly. The very first theory was based on the choppy waters that were seen in James's videos. It was theorized that one giant wave came and knocked all 3 men off board, and none of them were wearing life jackets. However, this theory didn't hold up to the state that the Kaz II was found in. If a wave was big enough to knock 3 grown men overboard, then surely it would be strong enough to also disturb their neatly folded clothes or their open laptop. Other than the magazine, newspaper, and wine cask, their cabin was also neat and tidy, so the wave theory just didn't hold up to the state that the Kaz II was found in. The second theory seems to be the most widely believed theory. It's rooted in the only evidence that the crew had even set sail, the tangled fishing line. This theory is basically an unfortunate series of domino effects that stem from that fishing line. It starts with Peter, who was fishing at the same spot that the line was found in, and maybe he leaned over to try and untangle it, and then he was knocked overboard by the choppy waves. James, who was the only one seen in the videos to not be seated, may have jumped overboard to try and help his brother. And that's why Derek started the Kaz II's engine, so he could go back around and get his friends. But in his panic to do so, the sails swung around and knocked Derek overboard. This would have left all 3 men overboard without their life jackets or a life ring, and their boat with its engine running would have been speeding off in the opposite direction of land. However, Derek, Peter, and James's families aren't satisfied with this. They say that all 3 men were skilled sailors who had taken a bunch of courses specifically for this trip. They weren't only experienced, they were qualified. They would have known better than to jump overboard without safety gear or to be knocked overboard by their own sails. So although this is the theory that's most believed, no one's really satisfied with it. Other theories aren't quite so simple, but they still have people who back them to this day. The third theory was that the Kaz II was attacked by a giant or colossal squid. The ship's torn sails that no one else can explain does support this theory. On top of that, small boats have been attacked by large cephalopods before because the animals mistake the boats for small whales or large fish. And these attacks are more common in the warm waters of the Pacific. And the largest known specimen of a colossal squid was caught off the southern tip of New Zealand. That's not far off from where the Kaz II and her crew were sailing.
In 2007, fishermen off the southern tip of New Zealand actually captured the largest recorded specimen of a colossal squid, and it measured 33 feet long from the tip of its head to the end of its tentacles, and it was estimated to weigh about 1,100 pounds.
But could a giant squid account for the loss of the Kaz II's crew?
Cryptozoologists believe that if a giant or colossal squid did attack the boat, it would have been able to pull Peter, James, and Derek overboard.
A colossal squid actually has very sharp, serrated edges on its suction cups in order to grab a hold of prey and prevent them from escaping. You're basically at the mercy of the squid at that point.
Personally, I don't think I believe this one. Not that I don't believe that a giant or colossal squid isn't capable of pulling 3 men overboard, it's just that the state that the Kaz II was found in doesn't support that. If a giant wave wasn't plausible because everything was too neat and tidy, then surely a giant or colossal squid attacking the ship would have disturbed their laundry. Also remember that the gun under Derek's bed wasn't touched. And even if the 3 men couldn't get into Derek's room and get the gun out of the case and load it in time, they had a set of plastic fishing knives sitting right there on the bench, and those knives weren't touched. Surely with 3 men on this boat, one of them would have tried to grab a knife to defend themselves. And if something big enough to pull 3 men overboard is attacking their ship, it's going to knock over their laptop. So what could take these 3 men off their boat without disturbing a single thing? You guessed it. Aliens. I finally get to talk about aliens.
Psychotherapist Barbara Lamb agrees that what caused the Kaz II tragedy came from the ocean depths, but it's weirder than any sea monster.
A number of people, including psychotherapist Barbara Lamb, believe that the 3 men were abducted by USOs, unidentified sea objects. She believes that the men are alive and being held captive by aliens who use stealthy underwater crafts. Barbara Lamb is convinced in the existence of USOs because of where she gets her information: the buried memories of her patients.
There's no doubt in my mind that there are extraterrestrial beings who do have encounters in the oceans with many human beings.
She gets into the deepest parts of their minds using regression therapy.
I would say maybe 1/4 of the people who come to me have had extraterrestrial encounters. Do you hear a voice as this is happening? Or how is it?
No, he's talking to me through my mind.
Barbara had so many patients describe similar experiences and in such detail that she had to accept that aliens are hiding in our oceans, which honestly isn't a theory I think is super crazy. We literally know more about space than our own oceans. We've even sent more people to space than to the deepest parts of our own ocean. We've sent 12 people to the moon since 1969, but only 3 people have ever descended to the bottom of the Marianas Trench. The ocean takes up 71% of our planet, and 95% of it remains unexplored. However, the entire floor of the ocean has been mapped out, but we can only see things that are larger than 5 kilometers. That's a really big gap between something being detected and something being undetected. Like, there could be houses down there. There could be buildings, there could be small towns, and we wouldn't know. Maps of our ocean floor are not as detailed as maps of other planets in our solar system. I don't want to get too far off track, but I'm just trying to say that maybe Barbara isn't totally crazy for believing that there might be something in the ocean we don't know about. An underwater vessel the size of a semi-truck could come up to the surface, abduct 3 men off a boat, and go back down, and no one would know about it if no one saw it. Now, the coroner has to put in a cause of death in a lot of cases, even if it's not technically known. So what the coroner put down for Derek, James, and Peter's cause of death was tragic accident. However, the coroner did note that he cannot be so definitive about the circumstances under which the deaths occurred. So the most accepted theory isn't that they were attacked by a giant squid or abducted by a USO, it's that they all fell overboard in an unfortunate domino effect that started with Peter's tangled fishing line. Remember, the Kaz II was found with its engine running. So if the men did fall overboard, they wouldn't just be fighting with the weight of their wet clothes and the choppy waters, they would have been trying to catch up to a sailboat with its motor running. Even for trained police swimmers, this was an impossible task, and Derek, Peter, and James were coming up on their golden years.
The Kaz II catamaran, even at its slow speed, would be uncatchable by the best swimmer in the world.
The Toronto police actually demonstrated how impossible it would have been for any of the men to catch up to the Kaz II once they fell overboard. They had a police officer fall off an inflatable dinghy and then try to catch up to it as it was being pulled away from him. They used a radar gun to clock the speed of the dinghy as it was being pulled away from him.
3, 2, 1, pull!
They get the dinghy moving at 4 kilometers an hour, less than half the Kaz II speed. But even at this reduced velocity, Derek simply can't keep up.
Even in a controlled situation in a pool with a very fit person, a very young person, a trained person, that he was still unable to catch that dinghy at a much slower speed than we thought the Kaz II was going. There's no way that these older gentlemen are going to be able to catch that vessel. They're basically doomed.
There are 2 other theories that are kind of way out there that I'm just going to mention briefly. One is that the Kaz II came across another boat that was trying to smuggle something overseas, so the 3 men were taken captive or killed for being witnesses to that. The other theory is that the men wanted to disappear. The theory is that Derek, Peter, and James met another boat on the water and that they hopped onto that ship, leaving the Kaz II behind. But there hasn't been any evidence to back up either of those theories. The most likely and the most believed theory is the domino effect theory. Peter fell overboard trying to untangle his fishing line, and then James jumped in to try and save his brother, and then Derek was knocked overboard trying to circle back for his friends. Unfortunately, like the coroner says, we can't be so definitive about the circumstances of which the deaths occurred. If their deaths occurred at all. Well, there you guys go. That was a bit of a different ending compared to the other ones in my Halloweek series so far, with sort of a unsolved, open-ended sort of finish. Hopefully you guys enjoyed, and remember that there are only 2 days of Halloweek left. I've already posted 3 other videos in my Halloweek series, and all of them have a different spooky topic, so make sure you go check them out if you haven't already. And while you're at it, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the other 2 videos that are going to be coming out this week. And since I'm already on this little self-promoting thing, just a reminder about my Instagram and Twitter as well. If you want to know more about me and what I do and what I like and what I get up to, that is where I post about it. I don't really share that on YouTube anymore. And because I'm a professional actor, a like or a follow on social media actually does help me out in my acting career. Literally like 80% of what we do is just networking and trying to get exposure, so a follow on social media actually does help me out in my acting career, and I really appreciate it if you do. Anyways, I will see you guys back here tomorrow for the second last day of Halloweek. Stay spooky.
Oh, Mr. Backwards, don't you know?
Ja,